as our physical level homes recreated on the real side represent the consciousness, so any alterations we make to the consciousness will be represented as changes to our real side houses. For many an experience I and others have shared, whereas the process of facing and releasing the agreements and attachments, the ideas that are the consciousness construct proceeds, so this is revealed generally as a reordering of the contents and layout of the house's interiors, very often as a removing of a clutter from them. And indeed, can this process of awareness and consciousness releasing be expressed as a complete restructuring of the houses, as I have shared experiences where the real guides, in the form of construction workers, have bulldozed the walls down on occasion, and even removed the roof, etc. In a recent real side experience I shared, having faced and released certain ideas that visually presented as the dismantling of small castles made from blocks, I then would proceed to set fire to the house, the ultimate expression of a consciousness releasing, purging by fire. That although we don't destroy the consciousness, as this is our personal self-construct, the real awareness is a tool for isolating and experiencing parts and pieces, ideas from the everything isness reality, that the true reality can be recognized from the comparison that creation provides. But however we have built and developed this personal self-consciousness tool throughout our many lifetimes, so we are rather stuck with its design, but we become more so as assuming our real awareness nowness positions of indifference to the consciousness, the facing and releasing of the ideas that it comprises of, symbolized in these various house rearranging, garbage removing, restructuring, and house incinerating ways. And now, in this real side experience, I would return to my UK former physical level house recreated, as though to determine my process in regards to my consciousness releasing overall objective, to see the extent of the damage the fire I had set previously within it had managed to achieve, although as I approached the entrance no actual door was evident. I couldn't even seem to enter the consciousness representing a property, for the entrance would terminate in as though an enclosed, closet-sized space, with no apparent means of accessing the house interior, suggesting possibly then a consciousness that as I continued escalating my maintenance of indifference too, so it was as though I was deciding to bar my own ability from entering it, as though nothing of it was of any interest or use to me. But as I persisted in my want to enter it, so I would as though pass through the barrier that the enclosed, impassable doorway presented as though, yes, we can become completely indifferent to the consciousness, but as I said earlier, we can't ever be rid of it as long as we operate in creation, until our is recognizing objective is complete, and at any time we can refer to the consciousness, the idea references that make up its construction, as though retrieving books from a shelf, but always endeavouring to return them, and not carry them with us. As I entered, the house had indeed suffered from my pyro activities. The fire I had set on vacating it previously had gutted the building's interior, and all that predominated would be ash, the remnants of furniture, etc. Interestingly, there would be a mirror still present. Generally, on the real side, our reflection signifies our ability to see ourselves objectively, the personal created self and affected body forms, an objectivity that is our real awareness standing as we see our creation for what it is, the tool for our ears' recognition, a creation which we, the real awareness, animates, and not that which we actually are. In the mirror, as I scrutinized my appearance, I would realize that my right eye looked entirely different to my left, as though far smaller and of a different design, and I had excessive fur or hair sprouting from my face, my hands, and even the tips of my fingers. As I continued to observe this oddity in the mirror, these curious features, my alien-looking eye and additional hair would recede, and I would be restored as to how I usually appear on the physical, my Kevin human form. I shared on a previous real side experience that where encountering an alien body type in a space station, a being who had advanced healing capability, the ability to manage the adverse effects of others, but also to evaporate and work them off, that the idea effects are not taken on by the alien, so his offered healing that I accepted was in relation to an agreement which would have in some way impacted my right eye had it not been released or removed, that should the agreement, whatever its nature may have been, or under what circumstances it was a consciousness installed, be maintained, what I had seen in the mirror would have been the result, the assumption quite possibly of what appeared to be an alien eye and excessive and unusually placed body hair, and perhaps my physical body alterations may even have continued to advance further. Potentially a kind of mutation effect I had taken on that quite possibly would have my body form become something altogether inhuman. But as I said, the alien being had identified this idea and that it wouldn't be especially advantageous and had removed it, verified in the mirror as the alteration only went so far and only was temporary before my usual form was restored. In a scene that followed, I found myself witnessing what would be the latest chapter in a war that had been waging between two alien species, that as impressions revealed had perpetuated for thousands of years of so-called time. The two species were as follows. One was an insectoid body form, the other more mammalian, fur-covered, looking somewhat ape-like. What was most glaringly noticeable was the sheer size differential between the two species. The insect beings were tiny in comparison to the ape beings. Although this wouldn't necessarily mean the insectoid stature was slight, but perhaps just that the furry ape species may have been very imposing size-wise. For indeed, as an example, the Orion reptilians are 300 feet tall, and so a mantis being, for example, that stood, say, at 15 feet, would seem relatively small in comparison. Despite the size difference, this didn't detract from the effectiveness of the insectoids where war was concerned, as both species boasted extreme levels of advanced technology. Both were a space-faring species, and I was afforded a quick rapid succession of scenes from the millennia of their war. As their endless conflict would take place on the surface of various planets and space battles between their ships, but the insectoid ships and surface weaponry and vehicles looked like small toys in comparison to the far larger ships and technology utilized by the ape race. But these dinky ships and ground vehicles certainly packed a punch, despite their size, equally matching the capability and firepower of the ape beings. As with all conflict and altercation between individuals or entire species, the outcome is agreement dependent, and that these two species were locked into a war with never a decisive victor, so would the ideas present with the consciousnesses of the insectoid species in relation to the apes dictate this stalemate to be the case. Simulation always must follow the precise ideas as consciousness installed, and that neither species had the agreements that the other could outgun them, so this was a conflict without end, unless it was decided that this nonsense should cease. For indeed, if the intent for war is maintained, this will embroil all involved into the effects of such that can span lifetimes. Whatever the lifespan of these species may have been, that they very likely on transition will be reborn again into the same species and retaining themselves immersed within this conflict. Or maybe a similar conflict, maybe all involved will be projected into completely different body forms and species, but species that also are in conflict. The creational position and body form may change, but the intent and agreements are retained, and in relation to others, that can have individuals constantly battling each other across creation and lifetimes, until they decide differently. I would have a participatory role. I had assumed the outward form and disguise of one of the ape-like species, for my objective was to bring an end to this conflict, but to do so incognito, remaining under the radar, that my efforts go undetected, that although then I would be present on one of the planet surface battle zones, in the throes of another insectoid and ape skirmish, I wouldn't participate in the carnage, just surreptitiously go about my business, the real awareness affording me what was required for the task, that I not be exposed, my ape form guise, and all I required to blend in, their language, etc. I'd like to mention here that when speaking with Dwayne in regards to some of these type of real side experiences that I involve myself with, he would speak of the importance of being now, operating within the nowness of the real awareness, aside and indifferent to all ideas we create or those as created by others. For indeed, as we hold to no ideas, as we are centered with the nowness of our real awareness true being states, we cannot then be the effects of anything, unless we indeed consciously choose to be, and therein lies our automatic protection. as anything untoward that can impact us. Any being that wishes to be abrasive can only be so if we hold to the ideas that they can, as everything in creation, every simulated situation, can only effect from our decided agreements held to, and that oftentimes these real side situations, those of species conflicts and endless idea drama as decided by all involved, are designed on occasion to draw us in, that we involve ourselves, and we become embroiled in the karma and a part of the effects. That although nothing is negated in creation, and all decided experiences and effects through our interjecting into the idea affairs of others are really then as further viewpoint comparisons to recognize the is by doing so, by interceding into the situations as decided between species, we are removed from our nowness, real awareness, aside from all ideas' positions, and may in fact render ourselves more vulnerable, or at least generate more situations we now have to creatively deal with. That, as I said, some of these situations may be purposely created to draw in the new friends, to have them embroiled in a creation, and were this a constant, so such could prove as a viable means of keeping individuals in creation as effectively as any personal self thriller-seeking ideas that are constantly chased. We could set ourselves up as the interceder into the affairs of others indefinitely, no matter how fine our motivations, and these then are ideas we constantly are embracing, and in creation we remain. Or maybe not deliberate creational conflict idea luring efforts, but that we choose to constantly involve ourselves, and this would be the case with these two warring species, the insectoids and the ape creatures. For often I will assist in resolving situations, if the sense is that by doing so will I then glean their attention to what we are presenting, the is. The opportunity then to provide the real purpose is recognition through this means of doing so. So really, it's ultimately a choice as to how we choose to share the is on the real side, but I would heed Dwayne's words, that like any ideas of creation, there will come a point where we recognize the need to withdraw from becoming involved in effects, for the simulator is nearing its end, and such conflicts that exist between species will always be taking place, right until the final moment of a simulator implosion. But here I was, in my ape species form, and it seemed there was indeed a means by which this millennia-old conflict could be concluded. For impressions revealed that a sealed container was present, concealed on this particular planet where this current battle was taking place, and whatever it contained was the means by which this conflict could finally cease. Impressions suggested scrolls of some ancient text or other that had been buried, forgotten, but if uncovered and shared with the two species, what the scrolls spoke of would in some way end the conflict. The exact specifics of why this would be so was never made apparent, only that this would be the case, and my objective was then to discover this long-forgotten container of scrolls, and on its delivery to both species, so would I have brought to a conclusion this war, that could have continued for who knew how many more thousands of years. The real awareness as part of the isness everything reality, a reality that permeates through all consciousness of ideas, so everything ever created, every agreement and idea is available to it, including the whereabouts of everything in the simulator, regardless of where or how long ago it was hidden, and that it no longer exists as a reference in a current body form memory, including then this container of ancient scrolls. And so would I be able to find it ultimately. Before my retrieval of the scrolls, however, I would suddenly become aware of a faint voice, and as I listened, so it would become more audible, and then would the owner of what was a female voice reveal its identity, that of the influence. This simulator affecting a consciousness expresses in the form of a seductress type female being, for indeed, whatever the overall design of a consciousness is, so will a form that expresses it reflect this. And as this simulator's consciousness overwhelmingly, the personal self, is as a wont to remain immersed and wallowing in the simulated, unreal, created thrills, so the expression of this, that of what Dwayne has referenced and identified as the influence, is of a similar, reflected nature, that of seducing all to remain in pursuit of creational ideas. But should the consciousness overall intent change, so too will the influence as a result. But in the meantime, so the influence operates through and is all consciousness, that which seduces all to remain in creation. And as I followed the voice of the influence, I would find the body form it was assuming, that of an alluring, dark-haired female, but curiously she was strapped to as though a stone slab, her ankles and wrists bound, a little like the house from earlier, consciousness representing, as the influence also is, that both these representational expressions of a consciousness can be stepped aside from. We can assume our real awareness nowness in different states in relation then to the recreated house and the being known as the influence. But just as I could enter the house that was initially closed to me through my indifference to it, so I could engage with the influence, although she was bound, just as my house was gutted and derelict. But as I afforded her attention, just as we may perhaps overly place a focus with the consciousness representing house, the ideas it still would comprise of, the influence became stronger, and eventually was able to break loose of her shackles. For as I said earlier, as Dwayne had mentioned to me, as we involve ourselves with ideas of creation, so we are removing ourselves from the nowness of our real awareness true positions. We are dancing then with the consciousness, with the influence. Exactly what I was doing here then, as I decided to intercede into and bring an end to the conflict between these two species. I had momentarily, for myself at any rate, during this escapade, fueled the influence. But when this chosen assignment was complete, so the influence very likely would be chained again, symbolic of my re-established indifference to the consciousness she represented. But for now, I was intent on finding the scrolls, the means of ending the conflict, and although I wouldn't be shown my recovery of them and the result, the end of the war between the insectoids and the ape beings, impressions were this would be the case, but throughout, until complete, the influence would remain very much liberated from her shackles.
Okay, Kevin, that's super duper. That's a whole lot for people to understand, and it's very, very good because it shows exactly what we're doing. And as a reference here, when Paul was here, and this is the idea of the individual that's chosen to have the rod of power or the position here, etc. You are subject to taking on everything. That's just how it is, and that becomes your experience. And in the long run, it's a good thing. But while you're going through it, it's hell and high water. Yes, I know from much experience, and it's ongoing. And I've decided myself to take all this on, and Paul too. He had a drink in Europe there one time where he knew it was poison, and he took it on anyhow. And he had to deal with his body for a while, him and REBISAR, in the physical sense. But he took it on because he wanted to take on the situation, just like what you're doing there. And this is what we're all doing. It just depends upon how much you want to step up and be part of what all life is, because this is what it is. And it's just like parents having children and having to deal with it, and for a long, long time, and for lifetimes, because it goes back and forth. And so you see how it is that, yes, as we do nothing, the consciousness is chained, you might say. That's the idea. But as we become involved, yes, all of a sudden we're facing the influence. And this is why most people look for a shelter or salvation or sanctuary, somewhere to basically hide from all this. And it's understandable, because this personal self is a particular, and it's a toughie. It is really a toughie to recognize this, and especially recognize the isness and really accept that intently. Yeah, and it's not just not knowing about it and having the knowledge. This is where most people stop. And then from there, they usually just leave and wander off and go somewhere else. They don't complete it because it's a huge task and most don't want to face it. I know it's disturbing to my personal self at times too, but I keep, dragging it along because that's just how it is. Just like, leading a horse to water. You can't make him drink, so you got to drag him along, whatever, a mule or whatever. And this is how it is. But how you've explained this is really, really good, because this is what it is. And so it's really learning with the intent to be now and to recognize this isness and to decide to do that. And again, you have the personal self, and it's shown there in your experience with the two eyes, etc. And yes, you do look a lot better, Kevin. And so the left eye is, of course, the literal side, and the right eye is the creative side. So it's showing that, yes, to be more creative, to constantly be more creative, and that just having the literal information and knowledge is not enough. And this is where I've, written many groups on this many times about how we are literalized as we are brought up. And it's very, very important to understand this, and most don't. And when I confront people, they don't really get it. They're thinking that they are free thinkers. And Paul referred to this too. And he referred to it in a way, and that is that all thought is censored. So what he was really saying is that, everything is seen. What you're doing in this world or creation, it is seen and is monitored. And I was talking to an individual last night, and at times he was reluctant to say certain things. He goes, well, I hope we're not being recorded and whatever. And I said, everything's being recorded. It's not only technology-wise, but all life sees you. And that really kind of bothered him. That's the personal self. It's like, we're being recorded? I said, yes, everything's recorded. And so again, this is where when I'm saying certain things, I'm speaking directly to those, just like your confrontation here, Kevin, and this is what we're all doing. This is the whole idea, is to confront and to deal with these situations as to help these unaware souls come through this process to become more aware, because every little individual soul that becomes new, it's very, very important. It adds so much to what all life is. It's amazing. We can't even consider it. It's so beyond anything that we know. And so that's why it is all set up like it is. And for us to come to that point with our little self to confront it, yes, that's huge. It's nuts. It's just really nuts. And most people, they don't want to hear it. It's the old idea, ignorance is bliss. In other words, if I don't know about it or I don't hear about it, I'm fine. But realistically, you're not. And so again, talking to this individual, letting him know that, yes, you're in this dark realm, and it is imploding upon itself. Those are the black holes. And again, he was very unaware of this, and it kind of bothered him. I said, well, this is how it is. You can either do this now, or you can do it at some later time. And guess what? There's no guarantee. So what you've expressed here and your situation, and willing to step up and to, the annihilation of the personal self. We don't really annihilate the personal self. That's not it. We just simply make adjustments, etc., because we need the vehicle. Just like we're not going to blow up our car because it's giving out bad fumes. We're still going to use it, for the essentials as to why we're here. And that's why this situation has been set up here in Mexico, because it's better than the US. Less restrictions, less nonsense, a lot of less knuckleheads to deal with, etc. And so because the focus is doing something real with whatever is all natural. That's our label, all natural. So what you're expressing here, Kevin, is truly great, etc. And I suggest others to also create groups from it and share it, because that's why we're here. That's the whole idea. Do something real, step up, scare yourself, get going. Yes. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
And so, sing the new you song. It is your connection to the true reality, the all is, that the real you, your real awareness, is a part of. New